the rifle's barrel pressed cold against her temple. "You're coming home, Rosalind, even if I have to drag your corpse." Her father's voice, the voice that once commanded ballrooms in Boston, now trembled with something darker than rage. Behind him, 20 soldiers waited. Before her, the Apache warriors formed a silent wall of defiance. Between them stood Maddow. Blood soaked his shoulder where her father's first shot had gone wide, hitting young Kahana instead. The warrior lay gasping in the dust while she knelt beside him, her hands already working to stop the bleeding. "I'm not going anywhere," she said quietly, meeting her father's eyes with a steadiness she'd never possessed in her old life. The desert held its breath. What happened next would change everything. But the real story? It began 6 months earlier, when a different shot was fired. Stay with me. This isn't just about survival. It's about what we're willing to lose to finally be free. Fort Benson, 1887. Where men traded lives like poker chips. Edmund Ashford didn't look at his daughter when he made the deal. Couldn't. 23 years of shame had calcified into something harder than desert stone. "She's yours," he told Maddow through the interpreter, "in exchange for the prisoner and medical supplies. Monthly." Rosalind stood in the corner of the commander's office, her corset cutting into flesh that had always been too abundant for Boston society. The room smelled of whiskey and contempt. She'd learned that smell young. Every failed courtship, every pitying glance, every whispered "poor thing" behind lace fans. Maddow studied her. Not the way men usually did, with disgust masked as politeness. His dark eyes moved across her face like he was reading something written there. Something true. "She is unwilling?" he asked in careful English. "She's a burden," Edmund snapped. "Take her or the deal's off." The interpreter shifted uncomfortably. Through the window, the desert stretched endless and unforgiving. Rosalind had heard the stories. Apache savages who scalped women, who tortured for pleasure. Her father was sending her to hell. Or so she thought. Maddow's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then he nodded once. "I accept." No haggling. No conditions. Just acceptance. As Edmund turned to leave, Maddow spoke again. "The woman. Does she have name? Does it matter?" Edmund was already at the door. "Everything matters." Her father paused, hand on the brass handle. "Rosalind, though she won't need it where she's going." The door slammed. Dust motes danced in the shaft of light through the window. Rosalind's hands trembled, hidden in the folds of her skirt. Maddow approached slowly, like one might approach a wounded animal. When he was close enough that she could see the scar along his jaw, he spoke directly to her for the first time. "Rosalind." The way he said it stripped away all the scorn she'd heard attached to that name, made it sound almost gentle. "You afraid?" Couldn't lie. "Yes." "Good. Fear keeps you alive." He gestured toward the door. "We leave now. Bring nothing. Dessert provides." As she followed him out into the blinding sun, she caught sight of her reflection in a brass fixture. The woman staring back looked like a ghost. Pale, shapeless in her restrictive dress, already dead. She didn't know it yet, but that ghost was about to burn away. The desert wanted to kill her. 3 days into the journey, Rosalind learned that heat was a living thing, a predator that stalked you, patient and merciless. Her dress soaked through with sweat. Blisters opened on her feet. Her lips cracked and bled. Maddow moved like smoke over the sand, tireless. He hadn't spoken more than necessary. Water, rest, walk. She hated him for his silence, hated him for his ease, hated him most for the absence of cruelty she'd been expecting. On the 4th evening, she collapsed. The sand came up to meet her face, and she thought, This is it. This is where I die. Part of her felt relief. Strong hands lifted her. Matto's face appeared above her, haloed by dying sunlight. He didn't speak, just carried her to shade beneath an outcrop of rock. His arms were solid around her, and she was too delirious to be embarrassed by her weight. He built a small fire, wet her lips with water from a skin. When she could focus again, he was roasting something. Rabbit, she realized. The smell made her stomach clench with hunger. Eat, he said, offering her meat. She took it, burned her fingers. Didn't care. While she ate, he watched the horizon. In profile, his features were stark. High cheekbones, strong nose, the kind of face that belonged carved in stone. A warrior's face, but his hands had been gentle when he lifted her. Why? The word left her unbidden. He turned. Why what? Why be kind? My father gave you a burden. He said so himself. Matto was quiet for a long time. The fire crackled between them. Then, your father is fool. Only fools measure worth by body. Something hot and unfamiliar rose in her chest. Not quite hope, but close. In my language, he continued, still watching the flames, we have word. Daklugi means heart strong, not body strong. Not beautiful by white man way. Heart strong. He met her eyes. I see this in you. When your father speak, you stand quiet. But eyes say different thing. She'd never considered that silence could be rebellion. My sister, Matto said suddenly. Ayana. She was like you. Soft. Gentle. White soldiers. They see only weakness. They hurt her. Take her. She dies slow. Sick. No medicine. His voice stayed level, but his hands clenched. Your father offer medicine for tribe. For this I take you. But also, he paused. Also, because I know what it is. To be thing thrown away. Understanding flickered between them. Fragile and dangerous. I'm sorry, Rosalind whispered. About your sister. Matto nodded once. Then he pointed at the sky. See? Daklugi. Stars. Even smallest. Still shine. Still matter. That night, as she lay wrapped in a blanket he'd given her, Rosalind cried for the first time since leaving the fort. Not from fear. From something else entirely. The terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, she mattered. The desert wind carried her tears away like prayers. The Apache village materialized from the landscape like it had always been there, waiting. Wickiups dotted the valley, dome-shaped dwellings of branches and hide that seemed to grow from the earth itself. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Children's laughter echoed off canyon walls. It looked nothing like the savage encampment she'd imagined. It looked like home, except she wasn't welcome. The moment they entered, Rosalind felt the weight of stares. Women stopped their work. Men's hands moved subtly toward weapons. A young woman with obsidian eyes spat at her feet. Yuma, Matto said sharply. The woman responded in rapid Apache, her voice like a whip. Rosalind didn't need translation to understand. White woman. Enemy. Betrayer. Yuma's husband had been killed by white soldiers. That much Rosalind learned later. Right now, all she knew was the taste of hatred, sharp and familiar as blood in her mouth. Matto led her to the largest wickiup. Inside, an old woman sat grinding corn, her hands steady despite their age. Her face was a map of years, beautiful in its weathering. Shima, Matto said softly. Grandmother. This is Rosalind. Dakota looked up. Her eyes were the same deep brown as her grandson's, but ancient, knowing. She studied Rosalind the way one might study a storm on the horizon, trying to determine if it would bring rain or destruction. Then she smiled. You are tired, Dakota said in accented English. Come, sit. It was that simple kindness that broke something in Rosalind. She'd expected judgment, cruelty, rejection, all the things she'd received her entire life. Instead, this old woman offered her corn cakes and water, patting her hand while speaking in Apache to Maddo. "She says you look like you carry heavy stones," Maddo translated. "She wants to teach you to put them down." Over the following weeks, Rosalind learned what carrying stones meant. Every task was a battlefield. Grinding corn left her hands raw and bleeding. Her first attempt at basket weaving produced something that looked like a tortured bird's nest. Children giggled, pointing. She burned the food, cut herself with the skinning knife. Collapsed from heat exhaustion so severe that Dakota had to spend 3 days nursing her with medicines that tasted like earth and lightning. Yuma watched it all with satisfaction. "White woman weak," she said in broken English, just loud enough for Rosalind to hear. "White woman die." One afternoon, working by the river, Rosalind made a mistake that could have cost her life. She reached for a decorated quiver, not knowing it was sacred, not understanding that touching a warrior's hunting gear without permission was a grave insult. The warrior, a man called Nashota, roared in outrage. His hand went to the knife at his belt. Rosalind froze, terror choking her. Maddo appeared between them, speaking rapidly. An argument erupted. Other Apache gathered, watching. Rosalind understood nothing except that she'd violated something sacred, and apologies in English wouldn't suffice. Finally, Dakota pushed through the crowd. She spoke to Rosalind in English. "You must ask forgiveness. Apache way. Kneel. Touch earth. Show respect." Her hands shaking, Rosalind knelt, pressed her palms to the dust, bowed her head. "Da-e-sa," Dakota prompted. "Say." "Da-e-sa," Rosalind repeated, her voice breaking. Silence. Then Nashota grunted, turned away. The crowd dispersed. Dakota helped her up. "First word," she said gently. "Most important word. Now you begin to learn." That night, lying on the pallet Maddo had made for her, Rosalind stared at her blistered hands and thought, "I am being unmade." She didn't realize yet that unmaking was the first step to becoming. The child's scream cut through the morning like a blade. Rosalind was helping Dakota sort herbs when the boy's mother came running, her son limp in her arms. His leg was swollen, discolored, snakebite. The puncture wounds were already turning black. Without thinking, Rosalind moved. "Lay him down," she commanded, falling back on the voice she'd once used when organizing charity events, the only realm where she'd been allowed authority. Now, she didn't have laudanum or proper bandages, but she had instinct, and she had the memory of her mother treating a stable boy years ago. Elevate the limb, cut above the bite, suck the poison. Her mouth filled with venom and blood. She spat, repeated, spat again. The boy whimpered but stayed still. Around her, the village had gone silent. Dakota handed her a paste without being asked, something that smelled of sage and other things Rosalind couldn't name. She packed it into the wound, bound it with clean cloth. "He needs rest," Rosalind said, finally looking up. "And water. Watch for fever." The mother stared at her. Then slowly, she pressed her palm to Rosalind's cheek, a gesture of profound gratitude. Something shifted in the village after that. Not acceptance, exactly, but possibility. Yuma was the last holdout. She avoided Rosalind, her grief a wall between them, until 3 weeks later, when her son, a boy of 6, called Little Wolf, fell ill with fever. Burning, delirious, crying for water that wouldn't stay down. Rosalind saw Yuma's terror, recognized it, the fear of losing the only thing that made loss bearable. She approached carefully. "May I help?" Yuma's jaw clenched. Pride warred with desperation in her eyes. "Please," Rosalind said softly. "Let me try." All night they worked together. Rosalind with her fragmentary knowledge, Dakota with her ancient wisdom, Yuma with her fierce love. They bathed Little Wolf in cool water, forced medicine past his lips, sang to him in Apache while Rosalind held his small hand. Dawn came pale and tentative. The fever broke. Yuma looked at Rosalind across her son's sleeping form. Something raw and honest passed between them. Then Yuma did something shocking. She smiled. "You stay," she said simply. From that moment, Yuma became Rosalind's teacher in earnest. She showed her which plants healed, which killed, how to move silently through the desert, how to read the sky for rain, the proper way to address elders, how to sit during ceremonies, why certain colors were sacred. "You learn slow," Yuma teased one afternoon, laughing at Rosalind's mangled pronunciation. "Like baby learn walk." Rosalind laughed too, and realized it had been months since she'd made that sound. Maddo watched these transformations. In the evenings, he began teaching her about healing, not just the physical kind, but the Apache way. How illness lived in the spirit as much as the body, how ceremonies called upon ancestors, how the desert itself was medicine if you knew how to listen. They sat close during these lessons, close enough that Rosalind could smell the sage smoke that clung to his skin, see the small scar through his eyebrow, close enough that when their hands accidentally touched, reaching for the same herb, the contact felt like flame. He pulled away first, always, but his eyes lingered. One evening, after a particularly difficult lesson where she'd nearly poisoned herself by ingesting a hallucinogenic plant, Maddo found her vomiting behind the wickiup. He held her hair back, brought water, stayed silent while she shook with embarrassment and residual visions. "Why are you kind to me?" she finally asked, the question she'd been holding since the desert. Maddo was quiet. Then, "Because you remind me that soft things can be strong. Because you try. Because," he paused, something unreadable crossing his face. "Because I see you. True you. Not the thing your father see." The desert wind carried away his words, but they'd already taken root. The ceremony happened at midsummer, when the desert bloomed impossibly with hidden flowers. Dakota dressed Rosalind in a tunic of soft deerskin, decorated with blue beads that caught the light. It fit her body, all of it, the curves her corsets had tried to punish, like it was made for her. Because it was. "Today," Dakota said, "you stop being ghost. You become woman." The village gathered. Even the warriors who'd been most suspicious stood witness. Yuma helped paint symbols on Rosalind's face, earth and sky, healing and strength. Maddo performed the ritual. His voice rose and fell in the ancient language, calling upon ancestors and spirits. He spoke of Ayana, his sister, whose spirit could rest, now knowing another would carry the healing knowledge. He spoke of transformation, of rebirth, of becoming. When he placed his hands on Rosalind's shoulders, his touch burned through the deerskin. "You are Leoty," he declared, "flower of the grassland, small but strong, beautiful in way that lasts." Leoty. She repeated it silently, tasting the syllables. It fit better than Rosalind ever had. That name belonged to a girl who'd been told she was worthless. This name belonged to a woman who'd survived. The celebration lasted into the night. There was food, dancing, stories. An old warrior recounted battles. Children acted out hunts. Women sang songs that made the hair on Leoty's arms rise. And Maddo watched her. She felt his eyes like physical touch. When she met his gaze across the fire, something electric passed between them, raw and undeniable, Later, when the celebration had quieted, he found her sitting alone under the stars. "You are happy?" he asked. "I am myself," she said, searching for the right words. For the first time, he sat beside her. The warmth of his body was a counterpoint to the cool night air. They didn't touch, but the space between them felt alive. "Leidy," he said, trying out the name. "It suits you. Thank you. For this. For everything." "No thanks needed." He paused, his jaw working. "I must tell you something. About why I take you from your father." She turned to face him fully. "Ayanna," he began, his voice rough. "My sister. She was 16 when soldiers came. They hurt her. Many times. Leave her broken. She dies slow, body and spirit. I could not save her." His hands clenched. "No medicine, no help. Just watching her fade." Leity's heart cracked open. "Maddo, your father offer medicine for you. I say yes for tribe. But also," he finally looked at her, "also because I see in your eyes what I see in Ayanna's. Someone treated like they are nothing. Someone who know what it is to be thrown away." His voice dropped. "I could not save my sister. But maybe I could save you." She reached for his hand. He let her take it. "You did," she whispered. "You did save me." His thumb traced her knuckles. Such a small gesture, but it sent heat pooling low in her belly. When he raised her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her scarred palm, battle-won scars from grinding corn and skinning rabbits and learning to survive, she felt something break open inside her. Not breaking like damage, breaking like dawn. "Leidy," he said again, and this time it sounded like a promise. The desert wind sang around them, ancient and knowing. Summer deepened into gold and heat. Leidy had become part of the village's rhythm, grinding corn at dawn, treating the sick, helping prepare hides, teaching English to children who giggled at her accent. Her skin had bronzed from the sun. Her body had grown strong from labor. The softness was still there, but now it moved with purpose, grace, power. She caught Maddo watching sometimes. His eyes would track her movements, the way she bent to lift water, how her hair fell loose when she worked, the curve of her waist under the deerskin tunic. He looked at her like she was water, and he was dying of thirst. She looked back the same way. The tension between them built like summer storms, inevitable and electric. It broke the night of the harvest moon. Maddo found her by the river, washing herbs in the silver light. She looked up as his shadow fell across the water, and the hunger in his eyes stole her breath. "I should not," he said roughly. "You are under my protection." "I'm not asking for protection," she replied, standing. Water dripped from her hands. "Not anymore." He moved closer. "If I touch you, I will not stop." "Good." The word was barely out before his mouth was on hers. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined kisses should be. Not gentle or tentative. It was consuming, desperate, months of restraint breaking like a dam. His hands spanned her waist, pulling her against him. She gasped at the solid heat of his body, the strength in his arms. He took advantage, deepening the kiss, tasting her like she was sacred. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. "Leidy," he breathed, "my flower. You are sure. I've never been more sure of anything." He lifted her easily, all of her, every curve an inch, and carried her away from the village to a place he'd prepared. A wickiup decorated with wildflowers, furs spread soft on the ground, the night air perfumed with sage. "I make this," he said, setting her down gently, "for when you are ready. You knew. I hoped." His smile was devastating. "I hope every day since the desert." She reached for him, and he came willingly. This time, the kiss was slower. exploratory. His hands learned the map of her body, tracing the dip of her waist, the flare of her hips, the softness of her breasts. He touched her like she was precious, like every inch was a revelation. When he unlaced her tunic, she didn't flinch, didn't hide. Let him see all of her in the moonlight, the body she'd been taught to be ashamed of, that he was now worshipping with hands and mouth and words in Apache that sounded like prayers. Beautiful, he murmured against her skin. So beautiful. Never let anyone tell you different. She pulled at his clothing, needing to feel him. When his chest pressed against hers, bare skin to skin, she made a sound that was half gasp, half sob. He laid her back on the furs. His weight settled over her, solid and right. When he entered her, slow and careful, his eyes never left hers. "Okay," he whispered. "Perfect," she breathed. They moved together like the desert wind, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, always true. He murmured her name against her throat. She learned the taste of his skin, the sound he made when she touched him a certain way, the way his control shattered when she whispered yes, you and Apache. After, when they lay tangled together under the stars, his fingers traced lazy patterns on her hip. "Stay with me," he said. "Always." "Always," she promised. She'd been a ghost in Boston, a burden at Fort Benson, but here, in his arms, under the endless desert sky, she was finally, completely, triumphantly alive. The harvest moon watched over them, blessing what had bloomed in the hardest soil, something neither destruction nor prejudice nor shame could kill. Love. 4 months after the harvest moon, riders appeared on the horizon. Leidy saw them from where she was treating an elder's infected wound. Her hands stilled. She knew that formation. Military. And at its head, a figure in expensive civilian clothing. Her father. The village mobilized instantly. Warriors formed a protective circle. Women ushered children inside. Maddo appeared at her side, his face stone. "You do not have to see him," he said. "Yes," she replied quietly. "I do." Edmund Ashford rode into the village like a conqueror. 20 soldiers flanked him, and beside him rode a woman with keen eyes and a notebook, journalist's tools. "Rosalind!" Edmund's voice cracked across the silence. "Thank God. I've come to take you home." She stepped forward. Maddo tried to stop her, but she touched his arm gently. "Trust me." Her father dismounted. She barely recognized him. His face was haggard, his expensive suit rumpled. He looked diminished somehow. Desperate. "Father," she said in English, the language feeling strange in her mouth now. "You're safe," he breathed. "We can leave. Now. Before these savages." "I'm not leaving." The words fell like stones. Edmund's expression cycled through confusion, anger, disbelief. "Don't be ridiculous. You've been held captive. You're clearly suffering from some delusion. We'll get you to a doctor." "I'm not captive. I'm home." "Home?" He laughed, but it sounded broken. "This? Living with animals? You have a home, Rosalind. A real home. And now you have a fortune." She tilted her head. "What?" "Your Aunt Constance. She died. Left everything to you. But you must come back. The inheritance requires you to live as a proper lady within a year. Or it goes to someone else," she finished. "I know how these things work." "Then you understand. We can forget all this madness. You'll be wealthy. Respected. You can—" "I can what, Father?" Her voice was soft, lethal. "Marry some man who needs my money more than he wants me. Live in a gilded cage while everyone whispers about the fat girl who couldn't catch a husband until she inherited. Spend my life grateful for scraps of kindness." "You're being hysterical." "I'm being clear." She switched to Apache, speaking directly to Maddo. The watching warriors. her people. Then back to English. I renounce the inheritance. All of it. Edmund's face went purple. You can't. I just did. She stepped closer. You brought me here to get rid of me. Called me a burden. Told a man he could have me like I was livestock. Well, Father, you got what you wanted. I'm gone. And I'm not coming back. This isn't about the money. Isn't it? She laughed, and it echoed off the canyon walls. Or is it about how the other officers' wives whisper? How the scandal has ruined you. How everyone knows you gave your daughter to the Apache. His hand moved. Too fast. The crack of the gunshot split the air. But Edmund's aim had always been poor. The bullet meant for Maddo struck Kahana, a young warrior standing guard, in the shoulder. The boy went down hard. Time fractured. Warriors surged forward, weapons drawn. Soldiers raised rifles. Edmund stumbled back, the gun still smoking in his hand. No! Leoty's voice cut through the chaos. She threw herself between the two sides, arms spread wide. No blood, she said in Apache, then in English. No more death. Maddo was beside her instantly. Blood seeped through his sleeve where a second bullet had grazed him. His eyes were black with rage, but he held his warrior's back with one raised hand. Leoty knelt beside Kahana. The bullet had lodged in muscle, painful but survivable. Her hands moved automatically, checking the wound, staunching blood. Someone get my medicines, she called. Yuma ran. The journalist, Margaret something, was scribbling frantically, her eyes wide. Edmund stood frozen, gun dangling. The soldiers had him surrounded now, guns pointed at him. You shot a man under a peace agreement, the commanding officer said grimly. That's grounds for arrest. She's my daughter. She's a free woman who just saved lives on both sides. The officer gestured. Take him. As soldiers moved to disarm her father, Leoty worked. She cleaned the wound, applied the paste Dakota had taught her to make, bandaged it tight while Kahana bit down on leather to keep from crying out. When she finished, she looked up at the crowd, Apache and white, warrior and soldier. This is who I am, she said clearly. Not the woman my father tried to sell. Not the inheritance someone wanted me to claim. This. She gestured to Kahana, to her medicines, to the village. This is my choice. Margaret Thornhill was still writing, tears on her face. Edmund sagged between the soldiers holding him. You're throwing everything away, he whispered. No, Father. Leoty stood, her hands still stained with blood. For the first time in my life, I'm keeping everything that matters. Maddo's hand found hers. She squeezed back. 5 years later, Margaret Thornhill's article had started something. A small shift in how some people saw the Apache. Not savage, not animal, human. The government still pushed the tribes onto reservations. Still broke treaties. Still tried to erase a people. But Leoty and Maddo built something that couldn't be erased. Their healing station served Apache and white alike. Their children, 2 daughters with their father's eyes and their mother's stubborn heart, spoke both languages, bridged both worlds. When Dakota passed in her sleep, she left behind journals of plant knowledge that Leoty continued, adding her own observations in careful script. On hard days, and there were many, Leoty would touch the small scar on her palm from her first week grinding corn. Remember the woman who'd arrived here, hollow and hopeless. That woman was gone. In her place stood Leoty, healer, wife, mother, worthy, free. The desert wind still sang its ancient song. She'd learned to sing back. If this story moved you, leave a comment below. Where are you watching from? Hit like if you believe everyone deserves to be seen for who they truly are. Subscribe for more tales of the Forgotten West. More stories wait in the dust. I'll see you on the next trail.